And we're live. Hello, everyone. Today I'm joined by Steve Godfrey and Daily Negativity, and we're going to be talking about animals, if they're included or excluded in antinatalism. But the core of this is how do we differentiate between antinatalism and not antinatalism? Um, Steve, do you want to just start us off about some of your views and we can go into discussion?
Yeah, okay, no worries. Um, so I'm going to be a bit scrappy with this because, to be honest, I'm still working through these ideas as well. So it's not like I'm really like, look at me, I've done something amazing. I could be really wrong on a lot of this stuff. So we'll see where this goes. But for me, it's important to be able to differentiate between what is antinatalism and what is not antinatalism. And my understanding is that statements such as Benatar's coming into existence is always a serious harm is being readily interpreted as defining antinatalism or encapsulating the idea. I'm arguing that I disagree with that. I think that that sounds more like stock standard pessimism. And I can't differentiate that statement from, because I can't differentiate the statement from pessimism, I can't understand why it's being considered as a definition of antinatalism or encapsulating the idea of antinatalism. Pessimistic literature is full of these evaluations, these kinds of evaluative statements, which we're all familiar with. I mean, life is suffering from Buddhism. Um, there's, to bear children into this world is like carrying wood to a burning house, all that kind of stuff. I think these are all the same kinds of statements. They're pessimistic statements evaluating the nature of existence and the nature of beingness. They're not actually making an antinatalist statement, in my opinion. And since I can't differentiate them from pessimism, I struggle to understand why they're classified as antinatalism. And then moving on from that, since they are classified as antinatalism, people are using them to justify the inclusion of animals. Now, my position on animals is I don't know if they are or they aren't included. I'm not really bothered either way, but I think the argumentation based on saying that coming into existence is always a serious harm equals antinatalism, I think that argumentation is faulty. So therefore, that line of argumentation doesn't work. That's pretty much my good morning, waking up, having the first coffee statement. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. What do you think, Daly? Any comments?
Uh, yeah. So the view that it's a harm to come into existence. I mean, the way that I understand antinatalism is basically it's wrong to cause individuals to exist. Now, the disagreement often among antinatalists is like, well, who's causing the being to come into existence and who is being caused to exist, right? So like, it seems to me like most antinatalists agree that it's wrong generally or always wrong for humans to cause humans to exist, right? Like I think most antinatalists would be on board with that. I think where antinatalists begin to divide is like when we start saying, okay, it's wrong for humans to cause other animals to exist, and then there's even further divide, I suppose. Like if you say it's wrong or it's maybe in some sense bad for other animals to cause other animals to exist. So like I think, and then you can make think of all the various combinations of these. But I think, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't. I've never thought of antinatalism as the view that it's a harm to come into existence. I think it's a view that the view that it's wrong to cause individuals to exist. But again, the disagreement is about
So you just said there it's wrong. It's wrong to what?
a wrong. Sorry, do you mean
Yeah,
wrong?
I just want to pick up on that language, like, because I'm wondering if you're saying there's something ethically wrong, or are you just this may get into the Oliver Halleck discussion earlier, but there's two ways of saying it. You could say it's procreation is not a good thing to do, or
Right.
it's better not to procreate. The other side is it's ethically wrong. I'm just that there's a bit of a
Okay.
split there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's not that much of a split in my mind, just because the way that but I should explain that. The way I think about these normative concepts is just in terms of reasons, I guess, right? So like reasons for action, reasons not to do things. So when I say that it's wrong to do something, I just kind of understand that as like there's overall, all things considered, reason not to do it or something like that. So I'm thinking in terms of reasons, and maybe this is maybe I'll just say a little bit about this now, because decision making in general, I sort of think of in terms of reasons. So like, how do we make a decision? We think of reasons to do this thing and reasons not to do it, and then we weigh those reasons in some way, right? We compare the strength of those reasons. And I think moral decision making is no different. We think, okay, are there reasons to do this? Reasons not to do it, and then you kind of weigh those reasons, and then the balance of reasons, whatever that favors, that's what you should do. So like the thing that you have overall reason to do is what I think you should do, and then if you should do it, then it's wrong not to, or if you shouldn't, then it's wrong to, right? Sort of thing. So I don't know if there's that much of a distinction for me, but sorry, does that help at all?
Yeah, but it sounds to me like you're moving in the direction of a normative claim with that kind of wording. So this is kind of what I'm getting at. Like every time someone is asked, or maybe another way of approaching it, what's your definition? Do you have a definition of antinatalism?
Good. Yes, I guess I would say it's. I would definitely say it's well, my understanding, the way I define. And another thing about this, I think, is as far as like discussing these views, right, and assessing like the merits of different views, I think we can do that just fine by using, what do you call it, like stipulative definitions. Like you're saying, here's how I understand it. This is what I mean by this term. And let's just discuss this, right? I think that's fine, like for philosophical, to discuss these matters philosophically. Obviously, politically, practically, whatever, it's important, what words we attach to what positions. But if somebody comes along and says, hey, what I mean by antinatalism, right, is that it's wrong to cause, individuals to exist on Thursdays or something. Like, I'm gonna, okay, fine, let's consider that view. When this person says antinatalism, that's what they mean. That's their version. But, we're likely to reject that view. But I think that's fine. You know what I mean? Like, and my view of just this whole defining this word thing is that I think ideally what will happen is like we'll discuss these various positions that we all call antinatalism, right? Like each person says this is antinatalism, and I think the hope is anyway is that these various positions will eventually, like you converge on some definition because it seems like the most plausible view. So like. And that becomes the standard definition. And then if anyone wants to bring their own definition, they can do that, right? They could just say, this is how I'm going to use the term. I think that's fine. Like, so, but going back to how do I understand it? Well, certainly I think it includes other animals in the sense that it's wrong for humans to cause other animals to exist. I think it's wrong for humans. And by the way, when I say wrong, maybe we could talk about this later, but I wouldn't say that it's always wrong. Like in every conceivable situation, it's wrong. So that might also differ from your view. But yeah, I would say it's wrong for humans to cause other humans to exist. And I would also say it's wrong for humans to cause other animals to exist. I think I'm inclined to also include other animals causing other animals to exist. Now, whether you call that wrong, I think that becomes controversial because you might think moral agency, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, okay. that would be my view. Maybe I would just say it's bad.
Yeah, I think that's a better word. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So because I know people are very worried about like, okay, how do you, they're not moral agents, we think, like most other animals. Anyway, sorry. That's how I would define it myself. But
so it's bad to bring sentience into existence, something like that.
Something like that, yes.
Yeah.
So to
Okay.
jump in, I would assume that your objection to that, or even mine, would be that from that definition, you can derive non-antinatalist conclusions, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's right. So you can say it's bad to come into existence.
Mm.
Therefore, we should do everything we can to make existence as pleasurable as possible. That would be a hedonistic approach, maybe. Or you could have the Buddhist response where, and it's not a normative response, but the Buddhists could say, well, yes, it is bad to come into existence. Therefore, life is suffering. Therefore, you should accept the Four Noble Truths. And I don't think we're going to call that antinatalism. So my point, I think, as Mark was saying, that I'm driving at is if you can derive another conclusion from a certain statement, I struggle to understand why that statement is classified as antinatalist or antinatalism.
If you can do, well, maybe I should say this. I don't know
Or
if
it
this will
would be
help.
entailed.
Okay. Well, I should probably say this then. I don't think, for me anyway, antinatalism is what I would call like a derived moral principle. So others have used that.
Okay.
But what I mean is, it's not a basic moral principle. It's one that I derive from a more basic principle, like say hedonism, right? Or hedonistic consequentialism or something. And the reason why that's important, I think, is sure, like if life is great, right? Like maybe we can imagine that at least, like, then I wouldn't be an antinatalist, right? So that
Okay,
shows it's
yeah.
a derived moral principle, not a basic moral principle.
So,
Yeah.
oh, sorry, no, keep going. I don't want to interrupt you.
Oh no, I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
Okay, so if I could I could just jump to the Jordan Peterson example.
Sure.
Jordan Peterson would absolutely agree that the creation of sentience, the creation of bringing sentient beings into existence causes them to suffer. Jordan Peterson agrees wholeheartedly with that, and he's even prepared to say that there's an asymmetry in favor of suffering when it comes to existence. However, we're not going to call Peterson an antinatalist, are we?
Well, no, because Peterson doesn't think that it's wrong to call us other.
Okay, so we're coming back to that word again. It's wrong, or it's bad.
Yeah,
he would say it's bad. He agrees with that. It's bringing.
You think so?
On the basis that it
does,
leads to suffering. That it leads to suffering.
Okay.
Oh no, actually no. Maybe Dean has a good point there. But Peterson probably wouldn't say it's bad to procreate. Like he would say it's better.
No,
to
he would just say like
procreate
the existence itself is just full of suffering, but that we have to justify the suffering.
Okay, so and then he wouldn't agree that it's bad to procreate. I think that would be taking his view too far.
Right, yeah.
Are you on board with that, Dean? Would that be correct?
Yeah, I think what I would say is that maybe, like, I don't know a lot about Peterson, to be honest, but maybe maybe they think there are reasons not to bring beings into existence, but there are also reasons to bring beings into existence, right? It goes back to the weighing and maybe Peterson just thinks overall, actually, we don't have a reason to be antinatalist. You know what I mean? So yes, Peterson can see the force, I guess, of some of these arguments, right? Like life is suffering, and yes, that gives us, again, I don't know if Peterson would even agree with this, but maybe a reason not to bring beings into existence, but that reason is overwritten, outweighed, whatever, right? Trumped by other considerations. Maybe that's Peterson.
Right.
The problem is when you just say, like, bringing into existence is a serious harm. If you just end it there, you could say, okay, that's what that is. But then you could have a birth affirming life where you're like, okay, this harm was done to me, but now I'm going to like continue to exist. I'm going to justify this harm that was done to me, and I can envision an argument that goes down a pro-natalist perspective, right?
I mean,
I
you
actually
could even
think Masahiro may
sorry.
something like that.
I was going to say
affirmation is what he calls it. I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Yeah, I think you can even believe that it's Well, you can certainly believe that it's a harm to come into existence and not be an antinatalist, right? Because you could just think that that harm is outweighed. And I think even Benatar considers that possibility, right? Like
Yeah.
if the harm were so minimal, you know what I mean? Like so insignificant, like even though on Benatar's view, like even if there's like a tiny amount, right? The slightest amount of harm or bad, it's still a harm to come into existence. I think Benatar would say that if the harm were so minor, right, like that can be outweighed by like parental interest or whatever, like or interest to have children or whatever it is, like or value to society. Of course, Benatar doesn't think that the harm is insignificant, right? So, but anyway, I'm just saying that I think it is possible, like logically, to think that yeah, it's a harm to come into existence, but overall, it's not. It's not. It's not wrong.
Which is why I think
That's how
like
I feel.
I don't know how to situate a definition appealing to so I don't know how because you were saying we and I don't know what we means. Are you talking about the antinatalist movement? Or are you talking about antinatalist philosophers? Are you talking about notable like in the canon of the literature? How does that like how do you situate the definition and determine that?
Sorry, is that a question for me?
For both of well, I kind of got Steve's summation. Well, actually, if you want to clarify, this is my view of what your view is that you look at the canon of antinatalism writers and see, shoot, you had a second part where it was like, it exclusively focuses on humans. So you're looking at the history of antinatalism. It's been focused on humans. Therefore, this is the default position, correct?
You're asking me that question, I think.
Yeah, I'm just like asking, like, because Daly was, I was like, the first such question I asked was kind of directed to both of you, but I think I already know your answer. But
Okay.
did I get your view right?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Did you want to like clarify a little bit more?
Oh, okay. So can you just repeat that? Sorry, my mind just wandered away for a second.
So it's about like so when we're trying to figure out, because Daly was saying that how do we use the word, and it could sort of morph, right? And so my question was, what's the we? Are we talking about people on the internet, or are we talking about, you know, in the philosophical literature? How do we determine the default position? That's
oh, I see. I try not to say we. I mean, I'm only representing my point of view here. I mean, obviously, I'm arguing for a certain position, but I wouldn't go further than to say it's a position that I'm arguing. I mean, I don't understand. You know, I don't think that these statements are antinatalism. For example, I wouldn't say we shouldn't think these statements are antinatalism. I think I'm careful to restrict my argumentation just to me. This is only my opinion, so I don't think I use we.
No, but you did appeal to the canon and
yeah,
and the history as well. So I'm just trying to figure out how do you determine like
Well, I guess what I was trying to do there was looking, because as you say, ideas do evolve over time, and going backwards into the literature, it seems that pessimism, for the most part, as far as I can tell, focuses on humans. I'm not aware of any particular focus on not human existence. And according to my understanding, antinatalism is something that is born out of pessimistic literature. So following on that kind of that chain of thinking over the millennia, I guess, I think that the default position is that this is a human-centered idea, and I would consider that to be a rebuttable presumption in the sense that it is possible that animals could be included, but I think that some stronger argument has to be made other than, well, coming into existence as a harm, like using the normal pessimistic statements to therefore jump to saying animals are included in antinatalism. But even doing that, it still requires you to say what is antinatalism. If you say animals are included in antinatalism, well, you have to be able to say what it is. You can't escape from that. Am I still?
Daly, any comments? If you don't, I got stuff.
And Mark, I'm just going to send you a JPEG into the Twitter chat, so maybe that might be useful in the way the direction heads regarding Oliver Halleck.
Okay.
That wants to be useful in the chat. So sorry, keep going.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I just go back to, that boring thing that people say. It depends on how you define the term. I mean, because
that's right. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. Because that's kind of a general thing in philosophy, isn't it? I mean, and just with these sorts of whenever there are like positions that admit of various of many refer to many different positions, like that happens very often, especially in philosophy. And I think, I don't know. I mean, again, in terms of as far as being able to talk about different positions in this area, seems to me it's fine to just say, hey, here's what I mean. It's like somebody could just say, here's what I mean by rationality, or here's what I'm gonna, and then we can discuss
but do you disagree that there's a line somewhere where it ceases to be the thing that they're actually saying they're talking about?
Where? Sorry, I'm not sure I understand.
Okay, so the way I see it is there's a line somewhere, like if someone's talking about, so if someone's talking about antinatalism and they're saying, look, I'm an antinatalist, yada, 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 but I think sometimes it's okay to have children. Well, that makes me, that in my opinion, that crosses the line. Not any moral line, just a line of syntax where it's, well, that's no longer what antinatalism is. So I don't know where the line is, but I'm pretty sure that saying that I'm going to have kids, that's no longer an antinatalist idea. You can't categorize that as antinatalism. So there's a line somewhere, and is that helping clarify things?
Okay. Yeah, but the line is determined by how you define it, which you would agree with that, of course.
But I would also ask, why do you define something the way you do? So
right.
So like this is an impression I get. The people who are saying that Benatar's statement coming into existence is a harm, those kinds of statements, they're saying that's antinatalism. My impression is that they're saying that's antinatalism because it enables them to include all animals. I think it's a bit of backwards reasoning. Whereas, one of the reasons I'm a proponent of the consent argument is because I found a way to syllogize it and make some reasoning that leads to it with a sound deductive argument. And so I think the reasoning works for that. I'm not suggesting my way is the only way. That's just, like you say, it's how I define it. But I think I don't think it's enough to just say this statement is antinatalism, therefore da 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 da. You have to establish why it's antinatalism. You have to be able to say more than just this is antinatalism, therefore. You have to be able to reason to your conclusion, reason to your definition.
Okay. Well, I don't know, Mark. What do you think about that? Because I don't.
So
I can understand reasoning to a position, but reasoning to a definition, I don't know. I mean, it's a interesting thought. But I don't know. Mark, did you want to say something?
Well, I actually had a question sort of related to that because in your video you said so your definition was the assertion that it is unethical for humans to bring entities. Well, sorry. Okay, so this was like what's it called? A redefinition proposal of the assertion that it's unethical for humans to bring entities with potential capacity for suffering into existence, but then you were working off of the assertion that is unconditionally unethical for humans to procreate, and then you used a gradient scale of that was it's so
Okay.
far, like from green to red, that this is so far off. I actually don't see how it's so far off.
Right.
other
So
than the
okay.
procreate
So
word.
in my note to that, which I've changed, I've put all the notes in the description so they're easier to read.
Thank you.
What I wrote in my no worries. What I wrote in the note was I'm no longer as confident about that particular example that I used.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I still agree with the idea that along the line there is a point where it ceases to be antinatalism. But the example I used, I'm no longer as confident about that.
And okay, then okay. I
I don't know if Dean knows what we're talking about here.
I showed him the video
All right.
before we met up.
So
I don't know how to. I want to show. I'm just gonna try and bring up the picture you sent me, but just give me a sec. But keep talking.
yeah, I mean this. I mean it could just be my stupid brain, you know. Could just be this. I'm very picky about defining terms. That's kind of one of my things. I think it's really important to define exactly what we're talking about and have a justification for why you define something like that.
Right.
And that's really the foundation of my thinking.
But then what does that involve though? Like the justification, like what are you looking for? I guess that's what I want to know. What are the conditions, right? Yeah.
You're right. Well, I guess I'm looking for something more than just saying this is antinatalism. That's really what I'm looking for. Like, so again, just coming back to coming into existence is always a serious harm. And someone says that defines antinatalism. And I say, why? I've got reasons to express for why it doesn't, in the sense that we've just gone through. That to me is just a statement of general pessimism. And it can lead on to non-antinatalist conclusions. So I struggle to understand, why do you call that antinatalism? And I've yet to receive a response to that. And I've also noticed, just looking around interviews and reading the literature and stuff, the people, when they talk about antinatalism, usually, I can't say always because that's not correct, but in the majority of examples that I've seen, they tend to default to saying antinatalism is basically the position that it's wrong to create other people, other humans. That just pops up everywhere. And my point is, well, if that seems to be the position that people default to automatically, that doesn't include animals. So there's a miscategorization. It could be that definition is wrong, which is of course extremely possible. But people tend to think of antinatalism in that sense, and if you do think of antinatalism like that, then I don't understand how you can put animals into that. It doesn't. There's a disconnect.
Well, so okay, I guess so. The first point was that are you saying antinatalism? If we define antinatalism as the view that it's a harm to come into existence, it seems like what you're saying is, well, that's the same as pessimism. Is that what you're saying? And
that's correct. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Well,
I can't differentiate between that statement. What's the how is that? I don't understand why that's antinatalism. Yeah, it's just pessimism. Yep.
Okay. Well, it seems like even if you do define it that way, it's not. Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess it depends on how you define pessimism. Because how do you define pessimism? Like, how would you define it?
Oh, that's a question I wasn't prepared for.
Well, because if you're saying they're the same.
No, good point. Yeah, I haven't prepared enough. That's a question I wasn't preparing for. Thank you for the question. How do I define pessimism? Great question.
Well, no, but that should be easy for you, right? Because
good point. No, it's a very good point. You're right. I'm not gonna disagree with you on that. I should have an answer to that. Yeah, good question. Pessimism. I mean, I'm just spitting off the top of my head. I think philosophical pessimism has a history of literature, which is basically talking about the existential nature of the nature of human existence and human beingness in such a way that it considers existence to be a negative on the whole.
Okay, but then
that's a good question. I'd need a better answer than that.
no, I mean I think that is a good answer, but I feel like then it seems like they are distinct. I mean, it seems like antinatalism, as again, the view that it's as a harm coming into existence, maybe that can be derived from pessimism, but to say that they're like somehow indistinguishable or they're the same, I don't think that's right. Like that they're not.
Well, I mean, so the way I read Benatar's "Better Never to Have Been," he formulated the argumentation to support the conclusion that coming into existence is always a serious harm. Up until then, like pessimistic literature, my reading was basically descriptive. Life sucks, or life is suffering, da 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 da. But until Benatar, we didn't have anyone who actually said, okay, here is a way to reason to that kind of conclusion, with using analytics. So he, in my opinion, his book provided the underlying argumentation for the pessimistic conclusion, and that pessimistic evaluation, that pessimistic evaluation can then be used as a stepping stone to an antinatalist evaluation. And my thinking is that the stepping stone is my position is it's a normative position, that it's unethical, yada yada. But recently, the more I've thought about it, I'm more open to the idea of what you seem to be suggested earlier, that it's bad to come into that procreation is not a good thing, and I don't mean ethically, just as an evaluative idea. I'm more open to that. I'm stumbling through it. Am I making sense?
Okay.
I'll shut up and let you go.
But I think I would basically just repeat myself, right? Like, if pessimism is, if we understand that to mean like the bad in life outweighs the good in life or something like that, like bad things are, well, yeah, again, I would just say, well then, I mean, antinatalism sure it can be linked to that view, but they're not.
I agree. Yes, it can be. It absolutely can be linked to that. That's exactly correct. It can be. But if you're saying it can be linked to that, in my mind, that means antinatalism is not that thing.
Why? I guess I don't get that. I don't understand.
Okay.
Why.
Well, maybe it depends on what you mean by linked. I would say an antinatalism statement, you can use the pessimistic evaluation as a stepping stone to an antinatalism statement. That's what I mean by linked.
Okay, that's fine. But okay. But just because something can, again, be derived from another position, I don't know why. Because I thought your objection to defining antinatalism as the view that that it is a harm to come into existence is that it doesn't. It's not then that's just pessimism. Like, I thought that's what you were saying, and I just feel like, well, that's not just. I mean, that's just the position that you get to apply.
It is just pessimism. In my mind, antinatalism is a derivative of pessimism.
But I think that's fine, right? I mean, but they're still distinct. Like, why can't you have a term for that specific thing that follows from pessimism? You know what I mean?
And I think so. My understanding is the thing that follows from pessimism. If you talk about so what I say is coming into existence is always a serious harm, and you need more reasoning than what I'm giving here. But that eventually you can end up at a position where you say it's unethical to procreate. That to me is the antinatalist statement. Coming into existence, like when I did my consent argument, this refers to what Thaddeus Metz said in his paper 2012, where he talked about he talked about how antinatalism. I should actually find the actual quote because it makes better sense than me trying to spit it out. But he makes the point that quickly, Godfrey.
Take your time, and there's no. Yeah. I'm actually going to try something here.
Okay.
I figured it out.
Don't try anything too radical, mate.
Oh, can you see the screen?
I'm not watching the screen.
Okay. Anyways, whenever you want to talk about that image you sent me, I can put it on the screen.
Oh, okay. So what Metz said was, oh, I've got the wrong window open. Here we go. Let me jump down to what Metz said here. Okay. Contemporary antinatalists aim to show that the balance of what is currently deemed moral common sense among professional philosophers goes in their favor. They claim to be teasing out the unexpected antinatal implications of principles that are widely held by academic ethicists. And that paper, he talks about how antinatalism is derived from non-antinatalist philosophy. That's what he's saying. And I agree with his point. The point he's making, like he talks about pessimistic evaluations being, I'll say that backwards. Antinatalist normative statements are derived from pessimistic evaluations or from non-antinatalistic evaluations. And I had a short email correspondence with him on this, and his answer to me was that it would be one. He said that, I'll just say this is the only one that's relevant, that interpreting an evaluative statement such as Benatar's is not antinatalist as such, even if it could figure into an antinatalist position. And he says that interpreting such a statement as Benatar's as antinatalism, that conflicts with the common usage or usage that would be useful to organize the debate. And I share his position on that. That there's that Benatar's conclusion is not antinatalist, and then you move on from there to derive antinatalist conclusions. Not just Benatar's statement. There's plenty of other pessimistic statements. Life is suffering, yada yada yada. The Ecclesiastes quote, yada yada. We can all use these pessimistic statements to end up at an antinatalist statement, which in my opinion is antinatalism. All the underlying statements are not antinatalism. Have I made things clearer or muddied the water?
Yeah, I mean that's fine. I guess I'm just still stuck on this thing of, like, you seem to say people aren't allowed to define antinatalism that way, and I don't.
Not at all. No. This has nothing to do with being allowed or you're obligated or you should do this.
Yeah,
way.
I mean,
Yeah. I am say, but I will say, if you define antinatalism as X, Y, Z, I think it's fair to ask you to provide the reasoning why. Why do you think it's that? I don't think that's an unreasonable request at all.
Yes. Okay. Well, I guess what I mean by not allowed, I just mean what you basically just said. Like, it's unjustified, right? You're basically saying to define antinatalism that way is unjustified.
So if someone says to me, I'm an antinatalist, but I think procreation is sometimes okay. Well, then my first thing was going to be, well, can you define what antinatalism is then? And explain why that's antinatalism.
Okay. I mean, okay. I mean, okay. Maybe we should talk about the image that Mark.
Okay. Yeah, that might help. Yeah. I hope.
Yeah. That's.
I appreciate you doing this, by the way, Dean. I really appreciate your thoughts.
Okay. You want to explain this?
Okay, so this came after I discovered Halleck from Lawrence's video where he talks about him. And what I determined after reading, I haven't read all of Halleck's book. It's in German. I did it through Google Translate. I read a couple of his chapters. But Google Translate's, it's basically, you can get more than enough to understand what he's saying. So there's two types of evaluative statements. Coming into existence is always a serious harm. That's what I would classify as pessimism. Halleck talks about an evaluative antinatalism where it's better not to procreate, or procreation. I mean, good and bad. This kind of, every word we use here semantics kind of, it becomes a bit murky, but it's better not to procreate is different from we shouldn't procreate, which is my position. That's what I consider it to be. However, the idea that it's better not to bring someone into existence, Halleck makes a case for that, saying that's a potential antinatalism. Now, from where I sit now, that does open up definitely opens up the door to allowing animals that humans bring into existence. However, Halleck's argumentation only talks about humans again. He doesn't mention animals at all. So whether he would agree with that or not, I don't know. But I do accept that if we're going to say it's better not to bring into existence, then that definitely does open the door. However, that doesn't tell us, it's not going far enough to say whether we should or shouldn't do it. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Well, yeah, Steve, did you want to say a little bit about why? Because, okay, so you agree that this statement, like we shouldn't procreate, humans shouldn't procreate. That's fine, right? As far as
that's well within antinatalism. Yep.
Mm-hmm. So, but I think a lot of people wonder. Oh, I'm sorry. Why then do you not like? Okay, so but you disagree. I think when we start saying we shouldn't cause other animals to exist by like breeding them, right? Like you're saying that's not. Can you just explain why you think?
Sure. Sorry. I'll let you finish your question.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah. Okay. So just maybe I should be clear. I'm only talking about categorization here. I'm not saying. So okay.
Right.
I'm not saying that human. My point that I'm arguing is that I'm not convinced that the idea that maybe even if we make a normative statement, humans should not breed animals into existence. Let's just put that out there. I'm not convinced that's in the antinatalism category, although I understand there are very valid, legitimate, strong arguments that hold up that conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not convinced it's antinatalism.
Yeah. But by the way, I think is that in fact what you believe, that we shouldn't, generally speaking, bring or cause other animals to exist? I mean, do you agree with that? I understand what you're saying. Like you're saying that.
No, I wouldn't go as far as the normative. We shouldn't do that. However, recently, the more I've been thinking about this, the idea that it's better not to, like I say, that's sort of I'm kind of percolating that in my mind, thinking I'm not sure that I can get away from that.
Okay, because I think a lot of people are gonna think that they're not gonna make that distinction. Do you know what I mean? Like they're just gonna assume that you're totally fine with people, bringing other animals into existence.
Well, I think this is a real misconception, like that I've noticed in a lot of the argumentation online. Like if I say I don't like, how can I say that? So I'll just say it. So Lawrence makes the point that he said something along the lines of he thinks antinatalism should be sentiocentric, because to say otherwise means that animals are beyond moral consideration. And I think there's a real big error here. I'm in saying that animals aren't included in antinatalism. I'm not saying that animals are beyond moral consideration. I'm not saying that I just want to get my negatives and positives right. I'm not saying that we should be bringing animals into existence, for example. Not at all. It's just a category argument. So is that enough to answer that?
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Like even if I'm vegan, and I'm not vegan, but although the way my thinking is going, we'll see what happens in the future. But even if I become vegan, I don't think I would say that the idea of bringing animals into existence falls under antinatalism.
Yeah, I think that would really clarify.
Sorry, could you say that last part again? I get easily distracted by chat. I'm trying not to pay attention.
Yeah, I've turned the chat off and I'm not even watching, to be honest.
Good call.
Yeah. Oh no, my mind has just farted again. What's the?
Just literally just the last sentence you said.
If I think I said, even if I became vegan, I don't think I would include animals within antinatalism. But that's a supposition. I don't know.
So can I just put forth my? I don't know if you had a train of thought that you want to go down, Daly. I know your time's limited, so I don't want to.
No, it's okay. No.
So if I make the claim, and maybe this is not antinatalist, and if it's not, under your view, I'd like to understand how it's not antinatalism. So if I'm saying it is unconditionally unethical, so I'm now making like the ought statement, I'm making a should and like an ethical thing. It is unconditionally unethical for moral agents to create morally relevant persons into existence. This is the belief system that I've had that drew me into this world. When we break down the traditional definition of it's bad to procreate, when I apply, say, marginal cases argument, or I apply interspecies overlap, or I name the trait that so many people, when I'm trying to figure out, actually, sorry, those arguments are not exactly what I'm saying, because mine is about personhood status. I don't know how that's not antinatalist.
Okay, so my approach to that, so I just want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly. It's unethical for moral agents to bring moral persons into existence. Is that the correct?
So, like, yeah, I was going to say moral patience, but the thing is,
okay,
moral, like, for the sake of conversation, we could say moral patients can be persons, but in law, I think that like person, like, you can like corporations can have interests, and there's weird formulations of that. So I was just trying to, like, a moral patient could also be objects. But anyways, like that aside, if we're just saying, yeah, like a moral agent generating or creating into existence a moral patient or moral, like that to me is the unethical part, and it's unconditionally unethical. It's always unethical to do that.
Okay. So it's unconditionally unethical for moral agents to bring moral patients, maybe / persons into existence, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, so maybe I the way I approach these kinds of questions, I'm not looking for a way to support the point. And this is just the way I've been trained and the way I live my life. Basically, I look for a way, and the way I work and blah blah blah. I'm always looking for a way that I can rebut what's being said. I want to find a hole in the argument. That's just my approach. Is always looking for the weak point. Because if an argument has a weak enough point that it can be undermined, then in my position, it no longer is viable. That's just my approach. People are going to disagree or agree with that. That's just the way I do things. So what I would do is I would look at this statement and I would ask you for the underlying reasoning. Like, I would ask you to define persons. That would be the first thing. And I would, and I know that you include animals in that, which I don't have enough knowledge on. I need to look into that more. So I need more understanding about that to see if the statement worked. And then I'd look for why is it unconditionally unethical? Why I struggle with this part. Like, let's just replace moral persons with animals. It's unconditionally unethical for people to bring animals into existence. I've tried to find good reason, sufficient reasoning to get to that point, but I can't do it without making some unjustified leaps. And I'd just ask you to just step by step show me how you got to that conclusion. Because I'm even starting to think now, maybe I jumped too far with my consent argument from blah blah blah, and then saying it's unethical. Maybe I took too big a leap. Because saying something is unethical is a big leap, and I think you need really strong foundations for that kind of thing. So I would just challenge the statement, that's how I would challenge the statement before I accepted it.
Okay. I will grant that I don't think in the literature it's been formulated. So what I think, because there is overlap between, well, at least in the spaces that I'm around, and I guess like people who are advocating. I want to try to minimize personal commentary, but there
Right.
are, figureheads who come from different ideologies, and I think that something that bleeds into antinatalism is animal rights and veganism, and an appeal would be made to marginal cases to justify personhood. And I think I might be muddying the waters by using that term. That's my own personal term. But because they would claim like what's morally relevant is sentience, because that word gets used a lot. I'm sure you've seen that, right? In these discussions. So it's like, well, like even if we accept the first one where it's like it's unethical to procreate, but procreation is human centric. I don't see a reason to exclude, because like all the morally relevant qualities of the subject of that's being created is morally the same as like just as it would be a harm for a human to be created into existence,
Right.
it's harming and is just as bad for the same reasons for let's say a non-human animal to be created into existence that has equivalent, say, sentience of, say, like a 5-year-old, right? So if the empirics could be demonstrated, I think that's like the overlap that's happening within the general discussion in these groups, is that people are saying, well, we're all animals, and there's an exclusion made in the definition because of species membership. And we're having a hard time where they're going to argue that that species distinction is discriminatory because what's morally relevant is sentience. I would go a little bit further to claim personhood status, but I'll say that aside. Now, I would agree, like, it's up to the person making the claim to show the step-by-step ways of getting there. But I think the divide within the community is that they've already made those step-by-steps through either the literature in animal ethics or veganism, ethical veganism particularly, and shoot, what's it called? I just lost my train of thought, sorry.
Effective altruism?
Yes, but I had another...
Oh, sorry.
I had another thing. So anyway, like all these steps about whether or not we should be considering them in a morally relevant way, not just considering, but like if you're going to say that it's just unethical to say bring a child into existence, and I say, well, it's just as unethical to bring a farmed pig into existence. Now we have to say, well, where's the difference there? Like, why am I like, to me, these are both persons. These are both sentient persons. These are both conscious beings. The wrong maker would be exactly the same, in my view, and probably in other people's views too, that are arguing for this.
Okay, so this brings up priors. I'm not an antinatalist because of suffering, because of the suffering in the world. My reason for being an antinatalist is I follow Cabrera's line of thinking. It's about manipulation and the structural moral impediment of living. The way I reached my conclusion to say it's unconditionally unethical for humans to procreate, the idea of consent is an integral part of that conclusion. If you take away consent, there's no way that I can see to jump to unconditionally unethical. And so when it comes to animals, consent doesn't apply to animals. And so if you're going to make a jump to saying it's unconditionally unethical in general to bring animals into existence, I don't know how to do that because consent doesn't apply. But there's maybe another answer that I've thought of. I'm sure, I haven't done it, but I am sure it's possible to create a good line of reasoning to the conclusion it's unconditionally unethical to bring animals into existence which are going to be factory farmed, and odds on they're gonna lead terrible lives, more probably than not, something like that. If you want to get into that kind of specificity, yes, I would agree that we probably can reach a point, but it becomes difficult though. But you could conceivably get to a point where you'd say it's unconditionally unethical to do that. But even now, I mean, even as I think about it, I'm not so sure.
Well, I'm not trying to get at you specifically.
No, I'm not feeling that. I'm not feeling that at all.
I'm just trying to say, like, would we consider people who make the suffering-focused ethic antinatalists? Because I'll grant the consent part for sake. Personally, I would question the ontology of consent when it, because like the impossibility of consent. I have to think about that some more, about what that means, because when it comes to non-human animals. But that aside, there are, antinatalists who are mostly focused on the suffering focused ethics. So like, would we say that, because like I know you're convinced by the consent argument, but would we say that they're not antinatalists? Because I just think they have a different foundation. I think it's pretty much agreed upon that there is that division. People who agree more with the consent, people who agree more with like this negative negative of life, pessimistic worldview. Would it fall within antinatalism, I guess, is what I was trying to get at. Not necessarily you specifically, if you would accept it as ethical or unethical. But if I just make the statement that this would be my view of antinatalism, could that be seen as a subcategory or a redefinition? Because you gave three different options, right? It's like a redefinition, a subcategory. I forgot the third now.
Change the meaning of procreate, read new
or change the
definition,
meaning of procreate, right?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Probably I should preface my answer by saying we shouldn't get too attached to the labels that we use, but maybe I would have to say, maybe I'm forcing myself into a corner where I would probably say it's not antinatalism. If you're just talking about suffering, and I know that people are going to run with that clip, it's not. Please don't take that to mean that I think nobody is an antinatalist except me, for example. That's not what I'm saying. I think being against suffering is not the same as being antinatalist. I think they're totally different things. I think that being in favor of trying to reduce animal suffering, that's not the same as antinatalism. At least I've not seen a way to make them the same thing. My impression is people are using the term quite fast and loose. Maybe it's got goodwill, or it's got some cachet, or something like that. Maybe again, whether it's if suffering is the reason you're an antinatalist, I still think you need to reach a point where you're saying, because of all the suffering, yada yada, and all these maybe some other reasons, I think it's wrong for people to bring either, let's say, sentience into existence. That to me is entering the antinatalism realm. That's the category of antinatalism. It's not that I think animal suffering is terrible. I think that animals shouldn't be factory farmed. In the same way, like I don't consider China's one-child policy to be antinatalist. That's conditional pronatalism in my sense. The unconditional thing being absent means it's not antinatalism. Birth strike is not antinatalism. And how's this? I mean, I could say even more controversially, perhaps, maybe vehement is not antinatalism, because if humans didn't have the negative, the deleterious effect on the environment that we do have, then maybe someone in vehement would say, well, okay, it's okay to procreate. It's okay for humans to have kids. So I'm not even, it's all conditional on whether certain factors are or aren't. Sorry, you go.
Thank you for bringing that up, because before we started the live, Daly actually brought up, he was surprised that I agreed with you on the unconditional part, but you just highlighted why I have a problem with it, because again, like if the environment, as you said, like with voluntary human extinction movement, if the environment was fine, and we lived in balance and harmony, then that they would be okay. I would assume they would be okay.
Yeah, it's an assumption. That's right. It's an assumption.
So that's why I actually agreed with the unconditional part there, Daly. Does that make sense?
Yes, but okay. Yeah, I don't know if we should. But
Okay.
but it does. Yeah, that it makes sense that yes, it makes more sense.
I just would people coming from a view of animals like this, would they be included under the antinatalism? And I'm seeing a hard time, like I'm having a hard time. My only stipulation is that it has to be agent relative. I think this is where I'm going to abandon this antiocentric label, because I think a lot of people, and you started this off, Daly, with saying that about wild animal suffering, and saying it would be, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth at this point, but it's antinatalist to also say that animals coming into existence in the wild is bad, right? And so that's where I would disagree. I think like the unethical part is relative to moral agents generating or creating moral patients into existence. So that's my framework. But I don't know how to navigate this if we all have three different definitions here. And so are we all not antinatal? Like who's going to be the arbiter of what is antinatalism here? I don't know.
You know, one thing I thought of yesterday is maybe antinatalism is just an identity that people want to use.
Maybe.
I mean, you know, it like maybe antinatalist means you're on YouTube and doing activism or something. I'm just throwing this out there. Maybe antinatalism is just an identity, and maybe all the other stuff we're talking about is still squarely within the realms of pessimism. Maybe to say it's unconditionally unethical to bring into existence, maybe that is just the inevitable consequence of pessimistic literature. And maybe the word antinatalism, I mean, even Cabrera, he hasn't used the word antinatalism until very recently. You know, all his literature prior to, I think, Benatar's book, he was talking about all this stuff and he never used the word. And I think the whole negative ethics thing falls under, I think, and I'm very happy to be corrected here, it falls under pessimism again. So maybe antinatalism is just an identity that people use for the hell of it. Just throwing that out there.
I think the word itself, though, like anti or anti-natal, right? Like it's making an assertion there. It's making an ethical claim.
Well, I would push back against that, which means it's negative for me. I don't think the word antinatalism is making an ethical claim as such. I would say you could say it's just that, again, the Oliver Halleck claim, it's just better not to do this. Or I'm not for that. I'm not for that. Doesn't necessarily mean I think it's unethical.
Okay.
I'm against something, but I'm not sure it's unethical is a big step.
Yeah.
So against, but even if we say against procreation, I'm anti-procreation, I'm against coming into existence. Yeah, okay. So what? That's kind of my response. Okay. And what next?
Do you have any
Thank you.
thoughts, Daly?
Yeah, well, maybe we should. I don't know. I wanted to go back to this thing, like the point about definition, because I think we're sort of doing two things. It seems like at times we're just we're just kind of talking about whether a certain moral position should be accepted, right? Like we're defending moral positions, but there's another thing we can do, which is to defend calling that position antinatalism. So like, and they're different, right? Those are different things.
Yep.
I think, yeah, and that's really what I want to get back to, because I'm still not clear on why, like, again, what the conditions are. So like what, so okay, so the first thing so the example that you gave, right? You gave a particular example of one way that people define antinatalism as this idea that it's a harm to come into existence. And say, okay, we shouldn't define it that way, right? And one of the reasons you gave, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but is that it basically just collapses into pessimism, something like that. And then we already talked about that. The other reasons were what? So I guess another reason is that's just how most people use the term. Like they tend to exclude other animals. Was that one of the reasons you don't accept? This is moving now to like including other animals. But why? I guess I just want to get a little bit clearer on how you why you rule out certain definitions, like why you say that one, that you can't call that, or it's not that you can't, but you shouldn't, I guess you're not justified in calling that antinatalism. I still don't, I'm not perfectly clear on what the
So I maybe a way I can answer it, if I think, and I'm presuming this, like if you subscribe to antinatalism, we can all agree it's unethical for humans to procreate. I think that's a pretty standard. Everyone agrees with that. I think that's not controversial within antinatalism. So that everyone agrees that's well within the rubric of within the category of antinatalism. Maybe it's we could ask. I mean, and because I've just started thinking about this, is like drafting something about this as well. But maybe what are the criteria? Why is that an antinatalism statement? Is it the unconditional unethicality? Is it the human procreation? Are these necessary criteria? I think that statement, it's unconditionally unethical to procreate, is such a statement that it's only an antinatalist statement. I think that's a bold claim, I think, but I think I can stand by that. That is a specifically antinatalist statement. That is to me the core of antinatalism. Please interrupt me at any time. The other argumentation I've seen is such like, evaluative statements such as Bennett's statement defines antinatalism. Coming into existence is always a serious harm for animals, therefore animals are included in antinatalism. But coming into existence is always a serious harm. Those kinds of statements, life is suffering, life sucks, life is malignantly useless, yada yada. On what basis do you say that those are antinatalism statements? Because prior to Bennett's book, coming into existence is always a serious harm was always just stock standard pessimism. It was just, but then suddenly Bennett published his book, and all of a sudden that's now an antinatalist statement. And my thinking is, wow, what changed? What was the shift? Why is that suddenly antinatalism? Why is it categorized as such?
But why is that? Why do you object to that? Because I mean, because words, like language, does evolve. Like what's wrong with that? Because it seems like you're saying that is an unjust, like somehow, like that violates some rule of defining terms or something, right?
Well, again, going back to the Jordan Peterson example, he agrees with that statement. Coming into existence is always a serious harm, and he's prepared to say that there's an asymmetry in favor of suffering. Okay, so he agrees with that statement. He's on board with it, but he's not an antinatalist. So it must be something other than that statement. Whereas if someone says, I think human procreation is unconditionally unethical, you can't maintain that position and not be an antinatalist.
Well, okay. but what about saying that it's wrong or that humans shouldn't cause other animals to exist? Why would that? I'm interested in what like your reasons for excluding or for ruling that out, I guess.
Okay, so again, it comes down to the word of wrong. What do you mean? Are you saying it's ethically prescribed? It's unethical, or it's just we probably shouldn't do that on balance of probabilities, kind of thing? So what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I guess I would just say we have overall reason not to do that. That humans, right? Like it's wrong for humans to cause.
Yeah, to create. Yeah. Okay. Well, what are your overall reasons? I mean, I know this. It sounds pedantic, but this is the kind of thing I want to explore. Like, what are there? It's good. It's sure you can say I think animals are included because of reasons. Okay, what are those specific reasons?
Well, it could be that because you believe that other animals are also harmed by coming into existence. I'm not sure why that couldn't be the reason.
But I do agree with that. Animals are harmed by coming into existence.
And then that's how you derive this principle.
Yeah, but to me, like, and as I just said, that's how the argument runs. You're actually making my point, I think, for me. That people say animals are harmed by coming into existence. Benatar said coming into existence is always a serious harm. Whoop, therefore, antinatalism includes animals. Okay, so animals are harmed by coming into existence. Is that sufficient? Well, let's just take animals away. Just sentient beings are harmed by coming into existence. Okay, so what? So what? That's not enough to say that procreation is. You'd struggle to say that it's better not to procreate, even just by saying people or beings are harmed by coming into existence.
Actually, can I jump in for a quick thing?
Yeah.
I don't like chat, but throughout the mud, some diamonds come into existence. I think this is a good question, but Yuri, you got to chill the fuck. Sorry, I don't even want to. Chat, chill. All right, this isn't a blood sports debate. Anyway, so someone asks about marginal case humans who can't give consent. Because when I was using my example, I was thinking of just like a 5-year-old, but there are marginal case humans who will never be able to give consent. I don't know if that plays a part in your evaluation of the unethicality of it.
I presume this is for me.
Yeah. Because there are humans that will never be able to give consent. But we still say that it's unethical for them to be created into existence from a moral human agent.
Yep. The whole marginal cases thing. So when we talk about normative claims, every normative claim is going to have marginal cases where it doesn't apply. In the sense that it's unethical to punch someone, for example. But you're always going to get, there are humans who just don't have the capacity to understand right and wrong, for whatever reason, and they're going to punch. That doesn't mean they're acting unethically. So when we talk about normative claims, we're talking about attributes that are generally ascribed, is that the right word, that a species generally has. And basically, humans basically have the capacity for consent. Sure, there's going to be outlying cases. I understand that. But that doesn't mean the normative claim is defective.
Right. Yeah. No, I figured you would answer that. I just thought, thank you. I thought it was a good question still.
That is a good, but even, I'm just trying, but even if I play against myself on that, like the idea, this particular person, we don't know that they're not going to have capacity to consent before they come into existence. Therefore, even if that's getting into that's going to be a detour not worth going down.
Sorry to interrupt. You were on a train of thought there between you two.
Well, I might say this then. So I said because they're harmed, right? Well, maybe it's because they're seriously harmed. Now you might say, okay, and maybe it's because in most cases that harm outweighs,
Sure, but again, I'm going to challenge you on that. Like when you say animals coming into existence are always seriously harmed, I'm just going to say, what's the basis for that statement?
Well, I think that's partly an empirical assessment of life, right?
But again, I challenge Benatar on this. I don't think coming into existence is always a serious harm. I accept that coming into existence involves being exposed to suffering and harm and all that, but I disagree that every existence suffers such serious harm that it makes the existence not worthwhile. I hear a lot of. Oh, sorry, you go.
Oh no, I was just going to say, okay, fine, right? Like let's say Benatar is wrong about that, but I feel like what you're saying is, even if, I mean, are you saying if Benatar is right about that, then you can call that antinatalism, and then we can now include other? I mean, because
no, I think his conclusion is just a pessimistic statement. It's a statement of pessimism.
What's a statement? Well, I don't know. I just feel like it's derived from pessimism, but I don't know why you can't have why you shouldn't have a separate name for that. You know what I mean? Like, because it's a specific claim. Like, it's not just like pessimism. It's saying it's wrong to cause humans and other animals to.
No. Coming into existence is always a serious harm. Doesn't say it's wrong.
Oh, it doesn't.
There's no wrong.
But that could be your reason, right? Like that you can give that as a reason.
Well, he presented the asymmetry, so he would say that that's his reasoning. He avoided moral reasoning, ethical reasoning to reach that conclusion. But again, prior to Benatar's book, that statement was just pessimism. Yeah, it's a harm to come into existence. Life has harms. Life is suffering. Like the Buddhist statement, life is suffering, which is attributed to the first of the Four Noble Truths. No one will call that antinatalism, but to me, it's
yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, sorry, you
go. Okay. So then, what is it, like a majority thing? Like, so if enough people, let me ask you this: if everyone, like the majority, clear majority, start using antinatalism, right, and they write that into the definition where it does include causing other animals to exist, then would you reverse your judgment? Like,
again, it's not whether antinatalism includes animals or not. That's not my fundamental objection. My fundamental, I wouldn't say objection. My fundamental point that I'm making is that I haven't seen the justification for why animals should be included. I'm not against including animals. It's not my position. It's just a position that, what's the reasoning for doing that?
Yes, but I feel like the justification you're looking for, one of the justifications is that, hey, look, people don't seem to historically, right? Like they haven't used it that way. So if enough, I'm just saying, wouldn't that, like, if that's what you're looking for, and enough people begin to use it that way, and philosophers and whatever, wouldn't that be some reason to?
So if some people, my opinion is, if you say that coming into existence is always serious, we'll just say Benatar's statements to save me from repeating it. If you say Benatar's statement equals antinatalism, I think you also therefore have to say life is suffering is the same as antinatalism. Therefore, to bear children, Zapp's thing, to bear children into this world is like carrying wood to a burning house. That is now antinatalism. You have to go back and take all these statements that say basically the same thing, and you now have to say that's antinatalism, that's antinatalism. And I think that's a bold step to take.
I don't know about that. I mean, I'd be interested to hear what Mark thinks, but so some people think you might think you can derive like a pro-death view from a pessimistic view, right? So many pessimists were also right.
Yes.
I mean, would you say then that we shouldn't, like, okay, so then what? That's just, I mean, isn't there kind of a parallel, like a similar thing you could say about that? I mean, where it's
so you're saying you could be basically, so if I'm putting words in your mouth, please correct me. You could be a pro-mortalist from pessimistic evaluations. Is it something like that?
So if I call that pro-mortalism, I'm not sure why you couldn't say, hey, but that's just pessimism. Like, that's not, like, why? So
I know you have a far better knowledge of pro-mortalism than I do, but my understanding of pro-mortalism is it's better to stop living as soon as possible. And again, you can push back on that. Okay, so I would call that a pro-mortalist statement, but maybe one of the reasons that supports that statement is Benatar's statement, or any kind of, life is suffering, yada yada. But those statements that support the pro-mortalist conclusion are not pro-mortalism in and of themselves.
Yeah, but that's precisely what I would say about antinatalism.
Okay.
So, like, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm just saying the fact that X, whatever, follows from Y, right? It doesn't mean that they're the same, right? Like, so I would say exactly the same thing.
But
I'm saying,
I'm not making the claim they are. It's other people making the claim those statements equal antinatalism. Like, you wouldn't say coming into existence is always a serious harm equals pro-mortalism.
mhm.
Is that correct?
No, but I wouldn't say that pessimism equals antinatalism.
Would you say coming into existence is always a serious harm equals pro-mortalism?
No, I certainly wouldn't say that.
Okay, and that's my position on antinatalism. I certainly would not say that's antinatalism.
Well, that's fine, but why wouldn't you say that it's wrong for humans to cause humans and other animals to exist? Why not?
I haven't said that. I'm not making that claim.
So you're okay.
I'm just because I don't include animals in antinatalism does not mean I think it's wrong to cause suffering, or to bring animals into factory farms where they're just going to be treated like shit for their whole lives. I think this is one thing I've noticed with this discourse. There seems to be a confusion that if I say I don't think animals are included in antinatalism, that means I'm not against animal suffering, or I don't think animals are harmed by coming into existence. That is absolutely categorically untrue.
Mhm.
They're separate issues.
Oh yeah, I understand that, but I thought you're not happy with people defining antinatalism as the view that it's wrong for humans to cause humans and other animals to exist, right?
It's not that I'm not. It's not that I'm unhappy with it.
We shouldn't
It's
do
just
that. We're not just.
no, it's not that. It's not happy or unhappy or anything like that. I'm just looking for a chain of reasoning that justifies calling a certain position antinatalism. And again, it just comes back. Benatar's statement, just as Benatar's statement leads to a pro-mortalist conclusion, you cannot say Benatar's statement equals pro-mortalism. Likewise, Benatar's statement can lead to an antinatalist conclusion, like it can lead to pro-mortalism, but that statement itself is not categorically, that is not antinatalism. And people are saying that statement is antinatalism. And that's the disagreement from my point of view.
But when you say that state, you're talking about
Benatar's statement, or those types of statements, life is suffering, coming into existence is a harm, yada, yada, all those kinds of statements.
Right.
I think it's an error. So, again, I'm just repeating, but you derive pro-mortalism from those kinds of statements. Same way you derive antinatalism from those kinds of statements, but they are not pro-mortalism or antinatalism statements.
Okay, but I feel like I can accept that. But why is the derived statement not? Why do you object to calling that antinatalism? So if I define antinatalism as the view, not that it's a harm to come into existence, but that it's wrong for humans to cause other animals to exist. Why? What's your objection?
That's verging on a normative claim to me, which is getting into, which I think is much closer to antinatalism. I just state strongly it's unconditionally unethical. Again, it's the language being used. It's if you say it's wrong, because you keep coming back to that word, and I interpret wrong as some kind of imperative. It's wrong to do that. The implication is don't do that.
Which, by the way, would be my view.
Or you shouldn't do that, or it's wrong. It's wrong. It's unethical. This is where the words can get a bit murky. So I'd like clarification on what you mean by it's wrong. But I think you've already done that, and I apologize for asking you to repeat yourself.
I guess, okay. Maybe we're sort of just we're not getting anymore. But yeah, I think it's just the question that I still have, I guess, is what sort of. So you're saying, okay, give me a justification for, like, okay, somebody comes with a definition, right? Or they want to define antinatalism this way. And you're saying, okay, what's the justification? And my question is, what sort of justification would do it for you? Like, what are you looking for? And I thought what you said is, well, no, I guess, can you just answer that one more time? I think you have already answered it, but what sort of justification do we need What are you looking for? You know?
Well, I mean, again, and this is this is just the way my mind works. I'm looking for basically a syllogized argument that would provide step-by-step reasoning. It doesn't have to be a syllogism per se, but it provides step-by-step reasoning that demonstrates that this statement is antinatalism.
But that's very strange, right? Because I don't know.
Okay.
I just don't know how you would do that unless you already have a definition of antinatalism.
But okay. Again, this is why I'm a proponent of the consent argument, because I didn't try to create reasoning for the consent argument to justify it. I just tried to create reasoning that would lead to a way to say it's unethical to procreate, and I found out consent has to be a part of it. So that's why I'm a proponent of it. So someone says they're a proponent of coming into existence always serious harm. That equals antinatalism. Why? Why does that equal antinatalism? You've already accepted it doesn't equal promortalism, but apparently it equals antinatalism. That doesn't make sense to me. Why does Benatar's statement not equal promortalism to you?
Wow.
Well, I'm fine with saying that it doesn't even equal antinatalism, because
I don't think it does. It doesn't. That's my point. It doesn't.
But
some people are claiming that it does. That's my point here.
Okay, but I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Some people are saying that statement is antinatalism, and therefore da 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 da. And I think that's wrong. I think that assertion is incorrect. I think it's an error.
But I guess I'm still not clear on on what basis do you say that that's an error though? Like, so okay, well, that's not how I understand it either, right? Like that's not how I
sure.
But I just don't know why somebody doing that, like why somebody defining it that way, is somehow making an error. Okay,
so basically the statement is, life is suffering, life is harm, yada yada. I'm struggling to understand how you can very clearly see life is suffering is not the same as promortalism. You can see that very clearly. But you're struggling to see that life is suffering isn't antinatalism. What's the block?
Well, no, but I don't even think life is suffering is the view that it's a harm to come into existence. That those are different.
Well, coming into existence is always a harm. It's not. I mean, in my understanding, and you maybe have a different understanding, coming into existence means that you will be exposed to harm for the duration of your existence. It's not talking about, or suffering. It's not talking about the actual event of coming into existence as a harm. Is a harm. That's not what it means. It means that when you are being brought into existence, coming into existence, you will inevitably be exposed to suffering, harm, all the vicissitudes of life, yada yada. So therefore that is basically the same as, life is suffering, life sucks. It's kind of the same kind of sentiment.
But it is saying something different though. I mean, it's not just saying, it's making a specific point about coming into existence. So I'm not sure why you wouldn't have a different.
But so does that. Again, to bear children into this world is like carrying wood to a burning house. Is that antinatalism?
Well, I mean, if somebody defines that as antinatalism.
Okay, but that's just so I object in that, but I don't agree with just people. If people are free to define a term any way they like, then the term becomes redundant. It becomes functionally useless, in my opinion. If we can if for example, if I say, I'm just X is yada yada, another person says X is this, another person, and they're just different things, well then the label that's being used is no longer useful.
Well, it's useless if no one even tells us what they mean, right? If they say,
okay, good, yeah. So tell me what you mean and tell me why you mean that.
Yeah, but see, why do I have to justify the definition? Like, and how do I do that? I guess that's still what I don't. I mean, maybe people in the chat get it. I don't know. Like maybe I'm just. What do you think?
Following the chat.
Well, I think that everybody's operating about what they decide, what they think is moral or unethical based on different normative views. So if you're going to say that it is, you're going to derive like your duties or your oughts from an evaluation on utility, then now we're just arguing about normative theories. But for me, that's how people derive what they think is right and wrong. But I think this is where I would hope that antinatalism can accommodate for both a consequentialist utilitarian view and a deontological view, and both say that the wrong maker might be different, but we're coming to the same conclusion. Because
No, I with respect, I disagree that we're talking about normative claims. I think it's just categorization of what is and isn't something.
well, I was just trying to highlight like the wrong maker. Like a
Mm.
consequentialist will say, well, this has bad consequences, therefore it's wrong. But you're not going to agree with that, and neither would I, because we're not consequentialists. But that's why I wouldn't go so far to go into the weeds of justifying the statement, but just does the statement, from a consequentialist or a deontic view, could they both be classified under antinatalism? I think they should, or I would hope they would. But determining like the wrong, you'd have to go through the step by step. Sure, that like I agree with you on that.
But Benatar, but again, I think Benatar justified. He did exactly what I'm talking about here. There's a statement: coming into existence is always a serious harm, and he wrote a book justifying all his reasoning to prove the legitimacy of that statement.
Yeah,
he
but
did.
like my view is that it goes beyond that. It's not just saying the quality, like that it's a serious. It's saying that we ought not to. And at the end of your video, you like it was like 3 clips or 4 clips of him saying we ought not to. So that ought is putting like there's a large part there, right?
And so the reason I did that again, as I mentioned earlier, was because that when people are asked what do they mean by antinatalism, that's what people say. That seems that, you know, again, if you look around, that's pretty much how people define it on the spot. So there seems
Sorry, could you say that one more time? I got distracted. I'm sorry.
No worries. The reason I included those clips at the end of the video is because that's how people define it when they're asked to define it. It's for want of a better term, anthropocentric.
But he was saying that we ought, like, so the clips that he was saying was like we ought. It's not just saying it's a harm.
He's saying we ought not to.
We
right,
ought
that's
not
how,
to, yeah.
So that's my point. Coming into existence is always a serious harm is not antinatalism. I don't think Benatar thinks it is.
Oh, right. Yeah. I'm in agreement with Steve on this. So daily, I'm.
But Mark, if somebody wanted to define it that way, what is your objection to that? Like what
because you can justify procreation with that.
No, but then maybe that's just.
And then how is procreation antinatalism? I don't like.
Oh, well then I guess you could just.
It's like use the example of vegans eating meat. I mean, there are certain exceptions like roadkill, but like anyway, but
sure.
Like. Yeah, if you're like, okay, bringing into existence is a serious harm, but due to like other external considerations, it's ethical to bring beings into existence, therefore antinatalism. What? Like that? I wouldn't get that.
Okay, so I guess
am I off on that?
No, that's same thing.
You're saying the word itself, like the.
No. Okay, so like, it's the descriptive versus the normative. It's like, okay, you described a bad thing happening, but now the normative is like, well, why ought you not to do that thing?
Well, but you could say I'm an antinatalist in the sense that I think it's always a harm for individuals to come into existence. But
and I'd just call you a pessimist.
I wouldn't go that far, but I still
think there's a distinction though there.
Because I feel like if I was to look at their view, or maybe I've had this view in the past, it's like focused on the creation part. It's not just because philosophical pessimism is like very broad, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Even if you say, well, it's philosophical pessimism, but it's like focused on one particular area of existence. But I don't understand how just saying the description is antinatalism if you're going to come to pro-natalist conclusions. Is that not a problem?
I mean, it might seem odd to say that, but I don't know why there's like a rule. Like, I just don't know if there are really these. I don't know why you couldn't do that. I mean, you could just say that's what I mean by antinatalism.
So okay, so if I was to put on my NU hat, right, and I say, okay, well, there are some considerations that'll justify procreation, but as a general rule or whatever, we're going to say that it's wrong. But what I could say is that the conclusion is either antinatalist or pronatalist. But I have a pessimistic evaluation or a description of reality. But my conclusions could either be pronatalist or antinatalist. Would that be fair?
Well, I think if you define antinatalism as just the view that it's a harm for individuals to come into existence, then it would actually be compatible pronatalism.
Okay, but I think most people in the literature are saying, because they have like people say it could be separated into two parts, but the two parts are necessary, like they're both essential. I am on the fence about that, but if that's the common view of it's not just it's just describing two parts of a whole that you need, they're both essential, then I don't think you can just separate the descriptive alone, isolated.
My
maybe you
opinion
could, but I haven't seen that exactly.
From what I've seen, my observation, and I again could be very wrong, but I think I think there's some motivated reasoning. I want to include animals within antinatalism, so I have to find a way to do it. I think that is actually part of this. Rather than the other way. Let's explore the idea and see where it leads.
Could you say that one time? I didn't catch that.
My observation is that there's motivated reasoning involved in trying to say that coming into existence is always serious harm is antinatalism, because that therefore means I can include animals.
I suspect there are people that are doing that for sure. I'm not going to deny that. But I can't say that's all the cases.
No, I'm not all, but I think it's an element. But even then, yeah, I mean, I'll shut up. Maybe Dean wants to respond or something.
No. But it seems like really at the end of the day, it's just this is how most people will find it odd for, if the result is that antinatalism ends up being compatible with pronatalism, you would think that definition of antinatalism should be rejected. But I still think ultimately it's just that's because most people don't, that's not how most people understand the term, right? So, I mean, isn't that really the criteria? Like, how do people use this word generally? And if you get too far away from that, then it's kind of it's your responsibility, I guess, to say clearly, this is what I mean by it. But I just don't see why that's a problem, to say, here's my understanding of this term. This is how I'm going to use it. Let's talk about this position. Like, I guess I'm saying I'm more interested in just talking about and discussing the positions rather than what we call them. I feel like that's like, I mean, that's
sure.
important, but you know what I mean?
Those are two different discussions. I mean, absolutely. The discussions about, is it wrong for humans to bring animals into existence? It's a very important discussion. Absolutely. I'm just talking about the category. And I think the category is also an important discussion.
Yeah, but yeah, and I
think it is. Probably other people don't, but to me, I think it is.
Yeah, there's like practical implications if you're going to, like, I don't know, let's say you have an antinatalist channel, right? Like, you're promoting an idea that may not be the right category. Yeah,
I mean, if your foundation isn't strong, like I said earlier, antinatalism can just end up meaning anything. Like if you take the negative utilitarian approach and you say, look, we have to, push the red button, or maybe we have to, make more people so that the animals die out, yada yada. That's a pronatalist, or maybe I'm not saying that is definitely pronatalism, but it's definitely not antinatalism. Like there's, and I'm trying to speak as generally as possible here. It's if antinatalism just means let's get rid of suffering, well, to me that's just, to me the word loses its meaning.
Yeah, and I would just call that NU,
Negative
right?
utilitarianism.
Yeah.
That's the way I'd look at it. I think antinatalism is different from that. I don't even think antinatalism is a strategy. I just think it's an idea. It's a response to the question: is it ethical, or is it right or wrong to procreate?
A conclusion, yeah.
But it does seem conventional to me, right? I mean, how we just agreed as a community to, say, to define a term in a certain way, and then
Sure, but if you say that if Benatar's statement is antinatalism, then I think you have to call Jordan Peterson an antinatalist, because he agrees with that. He's on board with that.
well, I mean, you would, I guess. I guess if everything you said is true, then yeah, Peterson would be an antinatalist in that sense. You might
But that's ridiculous.
find that troubling.
To me, that's just a ridiculous thing to say, because he's so anti-antinatalism. He's so
well, I mean, not. I mean, if that's, if in fact Peterson thinks that, and if that's one way to define, or one way that antinatalism is understood, and or we just stipulate, right? We just say that's how I'm going to use it. Then yeah, I mean that okay. Peterson.
Peterson says, I don't have any disagreement with the idea that the claim that life is suffering is a valid. This is talking to David Benatar in his discussion. I don't have any disagreement that life is suffering is a valid claim. That isn't the point of disagreement. I think there's been a broad consensus reached at the deepest levels of human thought that there's an existential conundrum that's associated with being, and the conundrum has two elements: the tragedy of being, and also the category of suffering. And so then he goes on to say that that the objection he has is the conclusion that's drawn from that statement, which is that we shouldn't procreate, or that procreation is wrong. And that he's objecting to those statements is objecting to antinatalism. Being on side with Benatar's statement doesn't mean doesn't make you antinatalist. It's a specific set of conclusions that are drawn from that statement. Those are the antinatalism claims. Those are the category of antinatalism.
Yeah, I mean, this is not really the point, but I'm not even sure though would Peterson agree that it's a harm to, because that kind of
yes, he does. He
right?
does.
What? You think Peterson would say that it's a harm to come?
I've just quoted to you from him. He said he's prepared to grant. I'm not disputing the fact that life is tragic and that people are subject to malevolence. What I'm disputing is your claim that the fact that that's the case means that you can move to the next position in your argument, and to argue that being is such that something should not exist. I'm even willing to accept the claim that it's asymmetric in favor of suffering. He's on board with all that.
Mm-hmm. But doesn't that sort of assume that hedonism, like that pain and pleasure? Because I mean, I can imagine somebody saying, "Okay, yes, there's more suffering."
But my point is very simply, just singularly, Peterson agrees with Benatar's evaluation.
Well, Peterson agrees that there's more suffering than happiness, but Peterson might think that there are other values, right? And that hedonistic theories don't capture.
Sure, but my point is just simply, if we say that Benatar's statement equals antinatalism, well, therefore Jordan Peterson is an antinatalist. That's the necessary step. That's the conclusion from that.
Well, I'm just, yeah.
So either Jordan Peterson is not an antinatalist, or Benatar's statement doesn't define antinatalism.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm not gonna I do think though that it is possible to interpret Peterson as just saying, look, one of the things that's bad in life is suffering, and there's more of that than happiness. But there are other things of value that makes a life go well, right? And maybe those things outweigh. But okay, if you're right that okay, Peterson thinks that it's a harm to come into existence, or the one that then yes, Peterson would be an antinatalist if we define like in that sense. I think that's fine.
That's
I mean,
bizarre to me. Yeah.
it is a little bizarre, but and maybe we would, we would probably ultimately reject, like we wouldn't use that as kind of the standard. But I'm just saying, I'm kind of just making a point that you can define anything how you want, but just be clear about what you mean by it. Because I think it's kind of hopeless we should be defining our terms anyway, because I mean, there's hardly any term, right, in debates like this or in discussions like this that isn't ambiguous in some way. Like that doesn't, people just do understand terms in different ways, and there are like nuances and like so subtleties there. So I think, I don't know, I just don't see that as really a problem. I mean,
well, I think it is a problem. I mean, not in the sense of, oh my goodness, it's a personal issue that I have to fight against. It just as a categorical thing. If you say Jordan Peterson, if your definition of antinatalism leads you to saying Jordan Peterson is an antinatalist, I think you have a problem.
Well, I'm not sure if it does, because again, but I take your. I mean, I don't know. I think that kind of assumes that Peterson is a hedonist, but
that doesn't. I'm not talking about what he is necessarily. I'm just saying what he isn't. He's not an antinatalist. So the fact that he agrees with Benatar's statement, he's totally on board with it. That calls into question Benatar's statement.
I would agree if Peterson said it is a harm to come into existence. Then I think I would say that. But I've never heard Peterson say that, because everything you said, I think.
But I've just quoted you directly. I've quoted you. Those are his words from his interview with David Benatar.
Yes, but I think saying there's a tragic component, there's more suffering. I think all of that's compatible with saying that overall life is actually good, because there can be other values.
No, he says he's prepared to admit there's an asymmetry in favor of suffering.
In favor of suffering, maybe. But,
yeah.
But
he says that.
Yeah, but I just feel like Peterson could just say, but really, I'm not a hedonist. So there are other things of great value that cannot be reduced to pain and pleasure.
So would that be antinatalism?
That might just be beside it. Sorry, Mark. Oh,
so like if I just like, we don't have to use him as a specific, but just as an example, hypothetically, of a person who's saying that they accept that it's a serious harm to be brought into existence, but they have other virtues or values that would justify that serious harm, then are you considering that antinatalism too?
I that's not how I used it, but I just don't know why.
That seems to be like, if you're just saying that it would be antinatalism to say it's a serious harm to come into existence, then.
Oh, but I'm not. That's not how I use the term. But I'm just saying, if somebody did, like if somebody came along and said, "This is how this is what I mean."
But I'm not asking you. Okay. I
have no problem with that.
Well, that's what I'm trying to push you on. Is so not you personally, but you wouldn't have a problem with someone saying that.
No. If they're clear that this is the antinatal that I'm putting on the table, and let's discuss this. That I think is perfectly fine, isn't it? I mean, why? We're free to reject it. We could just say, okay, well, that position.
So you would reject it. So you'd be okay with the person defining it, but you'd say,
we might reject
the reasons are bad.
Yeah, we might say that's a terrible, because I mean, going back to the ridiculous example of like, hey, it's wrong to cause beings to exist on Thursdays, only on Thursdays. That's okay, fine. Like that's how you understand it, but we're totally free to reject, and nobody's going to accept that most likely, right? So, but if somebody says that's what I mean, then every time I talk to that person, I just have to remember that that's what they mean. But that doesn't mean I have to accept that view, because it's ridiculous.
But again, I mean, what if a Christian says, "I'm a Christian, but I don't believe there's a God or something"? Like there has to be a line if everyone can just define a word, which of course people are free to, I'm all for it. Knock yourselves out, define anything the way you want to define anything. But if that's the standard for a definition of a word,
Mm.
then people can just define it according to whatever agenda they want to push with it or something. It just becomes a brand. It just becomes a label that people stick on their ideas.
I mean, maybe it's useful to distinguish different kinds of definitions. So like there are, what people call like stipulative definitions, right? So like the one about, don't call as being through on Thursdays. That's not a conventional definition. Like that's not the definition that's currently in you. Like that's certainly not a standard of it. But I have no problem with somebody just saying, here's my, I'm just that's how I'm going to define it for this discussion. Let's talk about this weird view that I have. I think that's fine, but it's not. But I'm not saying that makes it the standard definition, or that anyone should be expected to know that that's how they're using it, right? I think if you're going to have a really weird,
Sorry,
definition,
someone's at my door. I just got to step out for a sec, but keep going.
I think it's up. It's they have to be clear at the outset that this is what I mean by this term, because that's clearly a new way of defining it. But I just don't. I don't know. I don't think that's a problem. I mean, I don't have an issue with that really, as long as they're clear, right? Like if they expect you to know exactly what they mean, they're weird idiosyncratic. Well, that will be one thing. But if they say clearly, this is how I'm going to use this term, I see no problem with that.
Okay, I'm not even. I'm wondering if we even agree with if perhaps we agree more than disagree.
Maybe.
Like if like your example of we shouldn't create people on Thursdays. If someone says that's antinatalism, I think we both say, well, why do you say that? Well, how do you get to that point? Wouldn't you at least ask them to say? Wouldn't you at least ask them to justify why they think that's antinatalism, to test whether it's?
Yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, I think that's a good point. So I think there's a difference between saying that's antinatalism, like that's the convention. You know what I mean? Like that's the standard. Like I don't even have to define it. Because that's just how it's. No, it's not, right? So there's a difference between saying that's antinatalism and saying that's just how that's what I'm going to mean in the context of, like in this discussion, that's what I'm going to mean when I say antinatalism. Well,
so let's flip that on its head. Do you think it's possible to say that's not antinatalism about any given statement?
Well, you could certainly say that's not the way that it's standardly used, right? But I don't think it's really helpful to say that you can't, or like somehow I'm going to reject your defining it that way.
So if I say I think that the ecological niche replacement argument, are you aware of that?
I've heard of it. Actually, no. Can you?
Very, very, very basically, it just means humans should continue to procreate or ramp up procreation to overtake the ecological niches of wild animals.
Oh, okay.
And that will alleviate or eliminate their suffering, basically.
Oh, right. Oh, okay.
So that's very crudely. So would you consider that to be an antinatalist position?
Well, would I consider it?
Or do you? I'm not asking. Tell me your opinion. I'm asking generally, is that antinatalism? So I'll answer the question in my mind. Because it involves humans procreating, that means it's not antinatalism.
Yeah, I mean, you might be able to, well, you can distinguish different, like you can say, you can be an antinatalist in the sense that you think we should, I mean, you might think we should just minimize procreation, right? Or you might think I should not procreate. So is it like and those are different views. I would be fine with someone saying those are both, they can both be broadly antinatalists, but
I struggle with that. If it's let's continue procreation equals is categorized as antinatalism, I struggle with. And then if you say if that is antinatalism, then that in my thinking, that opens the door to saying, if I have a pet project, such as China's one-child policy, where it's basically population control, that is also antinatalism. That is also categorized as antinatalism, because it's talking about human procreation, whether we should or shouldn't do it in certain situations to achieve certain goals, and perhaps it even opens up the door to eugenics. Certain populations should procreate, certain populations shouldn't. So that seems to me to become antinatalism, if you accept that antinatalism includes pronatalism to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a way our focus is different. I mean, I would just be interested in, should we do those things, right? Versus should we call that antinatalism?
Sure. And those are two different. Yeah, those are completely separate
exactly.
discussions.
I'm more. I guess I'm just more focused.
Right. Okay, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. Yeah.
But I understand. Yeah, those are stuff. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Mark.
I just want to be cognizant of time because you said you didn't.
Yeah.
Good point.
Also, someone in chat had a question for you, Daly, if you don't mind.
Oh, okay.
It said, I missed the earlier part, but DN, do you have an issue with defining antinatalism as the conclusion that, quote, therefore we shouldn't procreate? This allows for JP accepting some of the main premises without being an antinatalist. I think that goes to what you talked about earlier.
Therefore we should.
Here, I'm going to put it up on chat.
Oh, thank you.
Do you see it?
Yes, I do. Therefore, we shouldn't procreate. No, I think that's how I would define it myself. And I don't think. I guess the only point is, if someone. Oh. Yeah. So. Yes, that's how I would, like, that's how I define it myself. I think of it as the view that it's wrong to.
So we're all agreeing with that.
But,
okay.
Well, we're agreeing. It's kind of like, that's just okay. That's how we're going to understand it. But I think where we maybe disagree is how we're determining, like, where the line is, right? And saying, okay, this is no longer, like, you can't, like, it's just crazy to define this position as, or to call this position antinatalist is crazy. I just don't know. I mean, I feel like, because I see that all the time, and like, often philosophers will just say, here's how I'm defining this. No one's ever defined it this way. It's a new way of, but that's just a stipulated definition. Like, I don't. Again, because my focus is just on the positions themselves and whether we should accept those positions. I'm not so worried about what the individual calls that position. And I don't know if there are any really, like, strict rules that govern that, like, thing. It just seems like mainly just, hey, it's, this is how most people use the term. So it's kind of, you have to tell us what you mean if you're going to come with a new definition that no one's ever used. But I don't mind people sticking a label on it that's like, oh, most people wouldn't call that antinatalism, but as long as we're clear about that, I think, because it's the same with all these other things like pro-mortalism, right? I mean, people understand that in very different ways. So I'm just going to say at the beginning of every video or whatever, or I try, say, here's what I mean. And that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the other positions.
But to be specific, like, again, it's not, I mean, people are free to define things any way they want. I'm specifically pointing out certain evaluative claims about existence being classified or categorized as antinatalism.
Yes,
that's really, yeah.
Yeah, but I thought you partly agreed, though, that that particular, like, argument, if you want to call a reason doesn't seem to work because they are different. Like pessimism and antinatalism. I mean, antinatalism as the view that it's a harm to come into existence. I think it's perfectly reasonable to have different terms for those.
But yeah, but again, I don't think antinatalism is the view that it's a harm to come into existence. That's the.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's not how you understand it, and you think we shouldn't. I think that so that's really the part that I have trouble with is like we shouldn't define antinatalism. Why? I mean, maybe someone in the chat gets it and they have a really, I don't know. I just can't.
Well, I mean, if I could go back earlier, I mean, I know time is running out, so I'll just maybe this is a way for me to conclude. But going back to what you said, that statement, Benatar's statement, that kind of evaluation is absolutely, certainly not pro-mortalism. Well, I'm just making the same claim with regards to antinatalism. That's all. So I'm just saying.
Yeah, but isn't that more? I mean, I feel like that's kind of help making my point, isn't it? Because you're saying maybe it isn't, but because you're saying
no, it could be. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Aren't you saying, hey, pro-mortalism is clearly distinct from pessimism, like a pessimistic evaluation of life? But I'm saying, okay, yes, and that's why it makes sense to call that something else. But I'm saying antinatalism seems to me is also different. Like it's not just, it's specifically saying that it's a harm to come into existence. Now you might say, wait, but that follows pretty quickly from the pessimistic evaluation. Well, it might, right?
No, that is the pessimistic evaluation.
I want to hear Mark on that. Do you think, Mark, do you think this is that they're essentially the same?
What are the two things that are essentially the same?
Steve, can you?
The two things, are you saying coming into existence is a harm and antinatalism?
No, I don't think
no. Oh, no. I thought you were saying coming into existence as a harm is the same basically as saying that life is suffering.
Oh, life is suffering, or right? Okay.
Oh no, I think they're different.
So I'm saying if Mark is right, if I'm right, then that particular reason or argument isn't going to work. Like that your objection that it just collapses into this other thing isn't going to work. So
I think what trips antinatalists up are the words coming into existence. I still think the essence of what Benatar is saying is that it's coming when you're made to exist, when you come into existence, you're going to face inevitable suffering, inevitable harm for however long you live, and that's going to be serious harm, and it doesn't justify being brought into existence, which I would say is getting closer to what antinatalism is categorized as. And also to something else you said as well, just because I'm interested in this particular thing of what is and isn't antinatalism, that doesn't mean the subjects outside of whatever these categories are not important and not interesting. I hope that's clear. Like you said yourself, you're more interested in the actual activities, like whether we should bring animals into existence, irrespective of the labels that we use.
Yeah, I almost feel like that's subsidiary, like that's a secondary. What we call it is not as important as whether what you know what I mean, like what we actually ought to do.
Well, I would say they're different conversations, not as important. Yeah, maybe.
All right. Well,
thank you for joining, Daly. I appreciate your time, and it's been a long time since we've chatted. So good to catch up in a weird way. Well, I mean, good to chat with you.
Yes, I really appreciate your time. Really, really good. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Mark. All right.
Have a good day.
All right.
Thanks,
Steve,
man.
do you mind staying for a little bit?
Yeah, I could probably do another 15.
Cool. How do you think that went?
I feel I haven't articulated myself very well, I think.
It's hard to do on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, this is still a new thing to me. Like I'm still stumbling with it, and I really take on board. I'm just really trying to take on board what he said, and the opposition. I'm trying to understand it before I say anything conclusive in response to it.
Do you
So yeah.
was it helpful or useful at all?
Oh, very much so.
Okay, good.
Very much so. Yeah. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Because I was worried because I felt like we looped a few times. I was kind of worried about that.
No,
Um,
it's good. I mean, how do you feel it went?
it was illuminating. I thought we would have. I wasn't sure that we would. The points of agreement and disagreement are interesting. I didn't see. Like I thought we kind of do all agree that antinatalism is saying, like, personally, that our definitions all that is wrong, that it's unethical to create into existence. But you would specify with humans, but we're saying that there's a wrong maker there. But when we talk about the classification of the categories for practical or like use, that's where Daly has a more open door policy. Even though if someone was to make the claim, he would say that I disagree with your reasoning, which is fine. It's weird to say. To me, it's an odd policy to have or to be that open, because well, I think he bit the bullet on. It would sound odd to say you agree that coming into existence is a serious harm, and then have some reasons to justify procreation, and then therefore classify that as antinatalism. But then we're just going to have a discussion about how we would disagree with those reasons. But I would fully. I don't think it's that controversial to be like, well, what this person is espousing, that's not antinatalism. Like you shouldn't even, like, that's just a flat out bad category. But where are the lines? I thought it was more clear to me before this conversation. It's because I'm ready to give up the sentiocentric label, just because I know there's that division within the positive duty to animals, which I would reject. I think it's supererogatory. I'm saying it's a good thing. I'm not saying that there's a positive duty. And I'm gonna repeat that one more time, because people listening are gonna think it's odd. I'm saying that it is a moral good thing to do, but it doesn't therefore follow that it's a duty to do that thing. I don't know. Anyways, either people get that or they don't at this point. But I'm just looking over my notes. So we talked about the definition of antinatalism. We didn't really get into positive and negative duties, because Daly's his ethic isn't about duties,
right?
Technically, though I think that there are oughts within consequentialism. So one thing there's a division between allowing harm and doing harm, or killing and allowing killing. I forgot the proper phrase. The reason I didn't really go into that is because that's a debate that's been going on for a very long time. Because one thing with the effective altruism take on antinatalism is that the label of EA is there, but the underpinning of the foundation of the theory is consequentialism. And so, like, Peter Singer's Famine, Affluence, and Morality paper argues that we ought to be helping those in far off countries and stuff like that. I forgot the term, but he's making the case of altruism as a duty. And then you extend that, some people extend that to wild animals. But that's not really debating, or it's not really discussing antinatalism. That's just that's debating or discussing normative theories. But at the same time, it is seeping into advocacy for antinatalism. And I think this is where I would be cautious about using the term antinatalism to promote not antinatalism.
Right.
So there's a practical problem with not figuring out like the lines that you're drawing. And the demandedness objection to that positive duty
Yeah.
from utilitarians. Again, like I wanted to talk about this, but the thing is, it's not really related to antinatalism. That's more of that's a different topic.
Mm.
But I think, like, I don't really have much to say about it. I think, like, I don't even know what to appeal to, because I think Daly was talking about the common usage of the term, but I don't even know if we should even be using that as a metric. Like, I don't want 12,000, I don't know. Is it like 100,000 people on the Reddit? I don't want, and they haven't probably, like, I've run into a lot of antinatalists have not read the literature. I really feel uncomfortable with them just by popularity get to define this ethic and this philosophy.
Mm.
That I don't know, that just makes me feel uncomfortable. But if that's the way we're working with definitions, for me, I would go with the philosophical literature. What is in the canon? What's been used? I will grant that I think that a case can definitely be made for including into like sentient beings, personhood status, about creating into existence. But nothing's coming to my mind in terms of a book or a paper on that. Karima Kerma does have some stuff on his website, I believe. But it would be rare, right? Like I think that was what you said about
Yeah, it's recent and rare.
It's recent and rare. So it could evolve, and I think there's room for that. But
And that's fine. I mean, of course, concepts evolve. That's great. And they should, because as our thinking develops, we gain better understanding of stuff. I think, connected to what you said about if you have 100,000 people saying X equals whatever, I think we need to guard against that. Like, and when it comes to language, I try to be conservative in my use of language. We need to have precise terms, and they need to mean something. There needs to be limiting principles to the definitions we use.
Yeah.
But of course, there's argument over what those principles may in fact be, where the line is.
The thing with the motivated reasoning is that I can see motivated reasoning for everybody. I could see like someone who's into eugenics to be motivated by it. I could see a vegan who's being motivated by it. I could see a carnist being motivated by it. To like everybody could have their own motivated reasoning to trying to use antinatalism, whatever that means to them. And like I feel like this category thing is definitely like it's important, and it's like I'm with Daly on this. Like whenever I talk to people about like when I was reading your article and I was like, yeah, with that definition, these things follow, like that works. Like that's how I read most papers. Doesn't therefore follow that I have to agree with that definition though.
Oh, not at all. The only thing I think you're talking about the defense thing I did, the consent. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing I would say in that paper, I don't want to call it a paper, it's just a blog post. The only thing I would say about that is that I think the syllogism is sound. It's a sound deductive syllogism, so you can't run away from that conclusion that's arrived at. But that doesn't mean that's the only way to define antinatalism. Those are different things.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. I think you have to agree with the conclusion unless you can undermine one of the reasons. But that doesn't necessarily mean you have to define antinatalism like this. Of course, that's the position I am putting forward. But that's just me. This is just one guy.
Well, this
putting
is
this out there.
Weird thing is, so like Lenny actually says in chat, to be honest, I feel like I listened to 2 hours of debating a straw man whose anti-nihilism defines actually whose anti-nihilism define. Why can't I read here? This is what it says. whose AN definition actually stops at the pessimistic evaluation. So, like
Great point. Great
all
point.
three of us agreed that it doesn't stop there, which is, I think what we were debating is the category of like claiming that that's antinatalism. I don't know. I don't understand how you can personally say, like, if I disagree that, I don't know how you can both hold two views of, okay, personally, I wouldn't say that's antinatalism, but I wouldn't be against someone claiming that's antinatalism. I find that odd. No?
I'm not against different ways of defining antinatalism. I'm against sloppy reasoning. Like if someone wants to define antinatalism as coming into existence is always necessary harm, I'm really interested to see the reasoning behind that.
Okay, yeah.
I don't have a, yeah, I'm interested in the reasoning why. And again, it just comes down to the way I process information. I actually don't really care what people's opinions are or what they think. I really couldn't give a rat's ass. But I do care about the reasoning that they've used to justify their opinion. That's important to me.
Do you see anybody making that claim?
Making what claim?
Like it's just without the second part that it's wrong or unethical to create into existence. Would you, like, is someone just saying that creating bringing into existence is a serious harm, full stop? That's antinatalism.
Yes, that's the interpretation I understand from Lawrence and Tagis's videos. My understanding is they split antinatalism into an evaluative and a normative part, and both of those parts can be used to define what antinatalism is.
Okay, I think
that's my understanding of what they're saying.
I think my first impression was that, but I suspect they were, well, at least one of the videos that I from what I recall was saying that it's two essential parts to a whole. But I'd have to review that. And now we're just talking about I was thinking about like the literature, but because these like advocates are influenced by the theory, right? So I remember in your video you were talking about this positive duty from just because you have the knowledge and you have the you can do something, therefore you ought to do something. That's wrong. And I agree with you personally from my ethical standpoint, but that is not the case for consequentialists. They are making that claim and they have a history of making that claim. And famine, affluence, and morality is a whole, that's his whole thing of we have a moral ought to do that because we can do it. And he stipulates at no significant cost to the individual.
Right.
If there's no
until it hurts you at a certain level.
Yeah.
But I disagree with that paper.
Yeah, me too.
I don't like. I just don't like people saying you have a duty to do something. That to me intrudes on my, or not me, but it intrudes on other people's autonomy. You can't dictate what other people's duties are unless they buy into them voluntarily, as far as I'm concerned. I actually think that kind of language really verges on being a bit manipulative. Well, I'm not going to say bit, it verges on being manipulative language to coerce you into believing you have a duty, so you have to do this. And I just don't like that. Yeah. I agree fully with there are lots of problems around the place, and it's a good thing to maybe find one that's worth fixing and do something about it. I think that's a great way to live. I no worries, but to say anything that I haven't voluntarily bought into is somehow a duty. Nah, I don't like that.
But I guess what I'm trying to highlight is there's a difference between objecting to the theory versus the advocate.
I'm not objecting to Peter Singer. I'm objecting to his idea.
Well, that's my point. Because when we use examples like Lawrence or Ted, I just think they're, and even myself, I'm influenced by other debates going on in philosophy that
Mm.
I mean, I guess I would be held accountable for what I'm what's it called, putting out there, that I'm advocating for. Like when I talk about veganism, it's not like Marx veganism. It's a history of philosophy that's uh, that I'm on the shoulders of other giants, right?
Mm.
And if there's a problem in my thinking, I don't, or sorry, there's a problem in my philosophy. I think it's a debate within, like there's an underlying foundational debate going on between the demandedness objection and principle of utility or marginal cases, stuff like that. Because have you seen Emil Torres criticize effective altruism?
No, I haven't. I follow him on Twitter. And I regret to say I've not watched any or read anything of his. So there you
So
go.
there's a lot of criticism about effective altruism from some people, but they'll highlight some of the crazy claims that will come about. But for me, like whenever people are having these discussions, I'm like, there's an underlying theory there that you actually object to. You're not necessarily objecting to the EA organizations. You're objecting to the normative theories, which is what I feel like, in essence, you're kind of doing, right?
You're talking to me now.
Yeah, because I feel like you reject.
I reject normative theories.
Yeah, and
I reject. Oh, sorry. You keep going if you want to.
well, I was like, 'cause like this positive duty that's derived, like arguments have been made. You don't accept them, and I don't accept them, but I can't say that they came arbitrarily. Like I have an arbitrary preference. I think they came about through appeals to certain moral intuitions that we have in developing that. So like the first one, I actually don't know the history of it, but I think one example was one person could be killed versus, so like one case is one person's going to kill a person, and then the second case is someone's going to allow someone to drown. Now but you have, like, you're standing right there and you're just watching it while this person drowns, and you can save them easily, but you just allow it. Like, so the intuition there is you've done something wrong there, right?
Okay, can I jump in?
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I'd like to jump in on this. Just because I say that I don't have a duty is not the same thing as saying I want the person to drown, or I'm also not saying it wouldn't be better to act. In that situation, of course I think it's better to act. I think you're a dick if you don't. Right. I think it's better to do that. But when we start putting like Good Samaritan laws, I'm against those. You know, where bystanders have an obligation, a legal obligation to intervene if they see someone being attacked or something, and they can be prosecuted if they don't. I think that's just going too far. I personally, if I'm standing next to a pond and a baby is drowning, I don't need to have a duty to go to intervene in that. I just think I'm a dick if I don't. Right. I think in my opinion, I'm going to use the word should, in the sense that it's better that I do that, not as a duty. I should do that. It's better to do that. So when I say I disagree with the duty, I'm just simply saying we have to be very careful about jumping to you have a duty to do something. I don't like that language. You have an obligation.
Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah, I was just highlighting that this debate's been going on for a very long time, and
sure.
I think I see some merit, like some philosophical merits to other theories that I don't agree with, or like I could understand their reasoning towards that conclusion. Even if
I understand it. Like again, you know, talking about Singer's paper, I understand what he's saying, but I just disagree with it.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. Is there? So we should probably end. Is there anything that you want to close off with?
I hope it wasn't too boring for people. I think this is such a narrow. I mean, it's kind of it's a very narrowly focused topic, but I think it does have important consequences. I think that that how we define this term, like I say, most people aren't going to be interested in this, and I accept that. But I think it does have interesting upshots. I think it has the results from how we define antinatalism are quite important, I think.
Cool.
I don't know if that's a reasonable way to close out.
Yeah. Well, thanks for taking the time and discussing this, and it's great to get daily as well.
Yeah, it was. Appreciate it. It's really good.
All right. Well, have a great day, and I'm sure there'll be some comments about. All right. Take care.
Cheers, Mark. Take it easy.